how I plan my projects. Well, first of all, I need 3 colors of ink. So in this case, I have Mont Blanc Royal Blue, Mont Blanc Irish Green, and one of my favorite all-time inks, which is the Diamine Salamander. Now, what do I do with these 3 inks, I hear you ask? Well, first up, in my Mont Blanc pen, I put the Diamine Salamander. In this Dunhill sidecar, which you can no longer buy, I'm afraid, goes Royal Blue, and my Lamy 2000 is Royal Green. Now, in addition to that, I also need a ruler, which is a 30 centimeter ruler or 12-inch ruler if you're in Imperial, and a pencil. And really, one more item, which is my 2026 planning book. And these items are the only things I need in order to start planning out a project. Now, it doesn't matter whether it's a personal project or it's a professional project. All my projects start in my planning book using 3 different colored inks. And today I'm going to show you my complete process for planning out a project. And the reason I do it on paper first is simply because of the science. The science is now overwhelmingly telling us that sometimes we need to slow down. And slowing down doesn't mean opening up your laptop or your iPad or your phone and sketching out a few ideas. What it means is to actually intentionally and deliberately sit down with a pen and just let your thoughts flood out onto the page. It is just an amazing thing you get into after a few minutes of once your brain engages with the page and the pen, you then get down into the actual real depths of what you have in mind for the project, which no digital tool is ever going to do for you. Seriously, it won't. And if you don't believe me, go do the research. The science is overwhelmingly telling us that we have to step away from the screen if we want to think, concentrate, focus, and really get deep into the depths of a project. So this isn't about the science, this is about how I do my project planning from the very beginning right through to where I put it into the digital system, because ultimately all my projects are going to have the digital output. Now, of course, if you're not into the fountain pen world, you're really missing out. I understand that many of you are genuinely not into fountain pens, and I can understand that. You don't necessarily need 3 different pens and 3 different bottles of ink. You could just pick up something like this, which is it's a Wallace & Gromit 3-color pen. So it's got black, blue, and red. I just need 3 colors, and I would recommend that you use 3 colors. And the reason for that is quite simple. When you plan out a project, these initial thoughts are just going to come out in a flood of, it's just going to be a mess. That's just the way your brain works. It doesn't hold everything in one place of the brain. It folds it all over the place, and things will just flood out onto the page. That's the first pass. Now, in my case, whenever I do the first pass, I always use my 1-color ink. In this case, I'm using the Salamander from Diamine and my Mont Blanc 149 because it's just a joy to write with, and that's the point where I'm writing the most. So I am putting down everything I need onto the page. Just flood it out. It doesn't matter whether it's connected or not connected. I just go to a quiet place, usually the dining room, where I can just have no digital devices on the table. I just open up my planning book and I just start writing out my thoughts into this planning book, which, by the way, is a Maraman Nemesine A4 lined notebook. Now, one of the things with the Nemesine notebook is you will need to draw out the margin. Hence the reason why you need a ruler. A good 12-inch ruler will do, or 30 centimeters, and a good pencil. I always put the margin in because the margin is where I'm going to write little additional notes in step 2. But step 1 is all about just dumping your thoughts onto the page. The next step is actually rather more important. Now, if you can, after you've done that first pass, I call it the first pass, with the one single color ink where you're dumping out your thoughts, after you've done that, leave it for 24 hours. Close the book and just leave it for 24 hours and get on with whatever else you need to do that day. Perhaps you need to deal with your communications or your admin or whatever, or you may need to go to a meeting. But just close the book. Just close it for at least 24 hours. Now, I understand there are some times where a project is urgent. It has to be acted on almost immediately. Maybe you're not going to have 24 hours to just let things simmer. In that case, please try and leave it for at least an hour or two before you come back. And that's where we introduce the second color. Now, at the moment, my second color is the Mont Blanc Royal Blue ink. It stands out, and I use my good old trusty Dunhill sidecar, which I believe Dunhill no longer make. But I got this 25 years ago no, actually I got this 30 years ago. This is a 30-year-old pen. Anyway, wow, whoa, that's scary. This is where I now go down looking at the notes that I made the day before, and I'm reading through the notes, seeing where things are and making some additional points. I add in a few little additional things. Now, in this particular project, it's a fictional project of sort of updating or re-establishing my productivity system. But as I go down this, I'm looking at the tools, I'm looking at the way I'm going to manage things. I might put in a few question marks because I'm not sure how I'm going to adopt it at that stage. But again, I'm still on paper, doesn't matter. I can cross things out, I can disregard stuff because basically that brain of ours is just complete chaos and all that stuff just pours out. But it's great. Now, if you're doing this in a professional capacity, by the way, you can actually take the planning book with you into the meeting, and anyone who has suggestions, you can also add them down. Again, I would suggest using the second color, which in my case, again, would be Royal Blue by Mont Blanc. But that's the second pass. Now, I don't necessarily need to spend a lot of time on the second pass. Usually for me, it will take maybe 30 minutes sometimes, depends on how big the project is. Perhaps I might have an hour. But I'm going to sit down again in the dining room, again without any digital distractions, and I'm just going to add in any additional thoughts or ideas into my planning book. And then we do the third pass. Now, the third pass is an interesting one, and the third pass is done with the Irish Green ink and the Lamy 2000. And once again, I'm going to go into the dining room in my case, but maybe you need to just find a quiet room somewhere in your house. And I'm probably going to spend maybe 20-30 minutes going through the notes that I've made over the previous 2 days, and I just act on them, add a few additional things. Sometimes I've not made a decision at all on what I'm going to do. Simply remember, this is planning. We're not doing the project at this stage, we're just planning the project. And that's the third stage. So often I'll find that the blue ink is rather more than the green ink. Hopefully the black ink in this case, or the greeny black ink I should say, is going to be the most color. The blue is going to be like second most, and then green will be the third. Now, this is the key point here. I've now been doing this for 3 days, and when I plan out a project, I really do genuinely do it over 3 days. So I do kind of plan ahead for this, because there's no point in just going down with the black pen and just going through and then forgetting about it for 6 months, because you're going to have to restart the whole process. The other thing to keep in mind with projects is planning is not executing or doing. It's just a stage to get you started with the project. And this is a key thing that I find with a lot of people. They tend to spend way too long in the planning. At most, it's 3 sessions over 3 days. Now, you can shorten that if the project's urgent, but generally, if you can, try to set it out over 3 days and use 3 different colors. And that's the case that I do. And again, you don't have to spend a lot of money on fountain pens. You can just pick up a $5 or even cheaper, I guess. This is a Wallace and Gromit one, so that's going to be a little bit more expensive. But anyway, those are the basic starting criteria for when you work on a project. The next step, though, is where we now go into the digital world. Now, the first step of getting into the digital world is to scan your notes. Now, in this particular example, it's just 1 page. It is a sample that I'm doing. So all I need to do is open up, in my case, Evernote, use the camera function, and scan the note in. That will create a brand new note. Now you can do this in Apple Notes. I believe you can do it in Notion. You can certainly do it in OneNote. You can do it in pretty much any notes taking application that you're using. But this is the critical point. What you're doing is you are generating a brand new note from the paper notes that you have made. And you use your scanning feature in whatever notes app you're using, and then you title it the name of the project. So this is, Productivity Update 2026 or whatever. That's going to be my project note. It's going to be the master project note, and I'm going to get that straight into Evernote. Now, by their very nature, projects are messy. There's a lot of stuff coming in. Personal projects could be generally ideas, things to buy. You're going to be putting a lot of links into your note. But there's two things that I always do. I keep a space at the top of the note for any documents that might be related to this project. So if I was doing an online course, for example, I would have the outline, which would be a numbers file, as in Apple numbers, and I will probably end up with a Keynote file as well. I want to link those at the top of the project note. In this case, I have no documents, certainly no documents yet, that I'm going to be using in my system. So there's nothing to actually save there, but coming in the future, maybe there would be. I then put a divider line, and then it's what I would call the critical next steps, or the action steps, next actions. And I will list out the obvious ones from my paper note, because I can just scroll down, look at the paper note, see what there's there, and say, oh yeah, I need to do this, 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 I need to make a decision on that. I will put all the next action tasks in there. Now, there's a reason I don't put these in a task manager. When I come to actually working and executing this project, I have found just purely from experience that at least 60% of what I initially think I need to do doesn't need doing, and 60% that I didn't even consider will need to be done. If I throw all that into my digital task manager, my task manager is just becoming a mess of stuff that may or may not need to be done, may get done and I forget to check it off. I don't need all that hassle. I don't need all that organization. It is just a waste of time. Instead, what I do is I will then create a link directly into my task manager, which in this case is Todoist, to say work on this project, and then I copy the link for the note and put that in the description area. So all I need to do when I have a task which says work on my productivity update system for 2026, I can click on that link and it will take me directly to the project note where I have all my next actions. And I can leave notes in there. I can add, say, I've worked on it today and this is what I did. I can see instantly where I was, what I was doing, and if there's any documents that I'm working on, I can just click on that link and it will take me directly to the document. This note becomes the master project note. It is a superb way of being able to stay on top of the project. If my boss calls me, if a colleague calls me, says, how are we getting on with this? All I need to do is go into that project note and I can see instantly what I've done, what still needs to be done, and everything is in one place. Now, if there was emails involved here, I'd probably create a folder, a project folder for it, and just have a separate note for emails, and I'd just copy and paste the relevant parts of the emails there. So that's my project setup from start to finish. It starts with a planning book and 3 different colored inks. In my case, it's blue, light green, and then a very blacky green. It also then involves 3 days. So step 1 is that initial pass where I go through everything. The second stage is where I now start refining it and adding a few additional ideas. And the third pass is when I finally put together and tidy things up, making it, or this is why I use 3 different colors, because it's easier to see the differences and what I've added over the 3 passes. Then it gets scanned into my digital system, and from there I can start working on the project. But I would stress, remember that planning is fun, it's great, you get lots of toys you can play with if you wish, or simply whatever, I don't know what you call these pens, but these kind of pens, you can do whatever you want with that. You don't even have to buy a Maraman Nemesis notebook. You can do whatever you like. But I would always recommend start your project planning on paper first. Allow enough time for you to let your thoughts flood out and then go to the digital place. You will find that the projects just work way much smoother and you'll have a lot more fun when setting up the project. I hope you found this useful. If you want to learn more about my actual digital productivity system, then my COD course is completely free. I'll put a link to that in the show notes below. You can take that and it will give you the basic fundamentals of any powerful productivity system, which is built around the system or the concept of collect, organize, and do. Hopefully you'll join me in that course. It is a superb course and it's completely free of charge. Okay, if you want to learn more about how I use all my analog system, then this video up here would be the one to watch next.